What should you train based on your score level that you currently shoot? I had a really good question the other day that was asking about this, so I wanted to cover it in a video. And essentially, someone in my community, which you can join in the link below if you want to join, in the questions section, there's a question and answer section where people can ask a question. And as you can see on the screen here, it's a little bit of a long question, so I'll kind of read through and paraphrase it. But essentially, they said, what should I work on? And what should we work on? Where is our time and effort best spent? If you're using scoring as a metric, what are the most likely things to be practicing if we are searching for continued improvement? For example, if I'm shooting 280 average at 70 meters, what are the most likely biggest bangs for my bucks? If my arrow volume is rather low, 100 arrows 3 times a week, should I simply look to increase arrow volume and worry about potential form issues later? I suppose it depends on the form issue. Do I remedy this first with a specific form issue, or do I keep shooting and increase the volume while continuing to work on hooking, which was the example they gave? I've seen archers really putting in the time and doing 200 or 300 arrows a day, 5 to 6 days a week, and still hovering at their same averages. This is a key thing I want to talk about in a second. In the real world, if I shoot 100 plus arrows a day, 5 to 6 days a week, then my average immediately jumps 15 to 20 points after 2 weeks. But my release is still less than desirable. Okay, so I want to pick up on this later as well. I abhor the idea of practicing incorrectly over and over again. I feel it sets an artificial ceiling limit. So that's the first example. Maybe we'll get into the second example in a minute, but there's a lot to break down here that I think that we need to cover. So we'll kind of start with that. So the first thing that I want to cover is here they say there's sometimes too much time fixing and not enough shooting. I've seen archers putting in the time 200 to 300 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, and not improving. So they bring up a couple of really important points. You can shoot hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of arrows and not improve. I've seen archers they said 200 to 300 arrows in this example. I've seen archers shooting 700 to 800 arrows per day for about a year. They'd quit their job to train full time. They had fully committed, so 10 out of 10 for that. But after a year of doing this, they were still shooting the same level. They were shooting under 600 or around about or under 600 on a 720 at the start. And then after a year of training, 700-800 hours a day, they're shooting the same score. And it's not even really it's not a great score. Like, that's not going to be competitive. We're talking about World Cups here. This was someone that was going to World Cups and had quit their job to pursue shooting full time. So this does happen more than you think. The key thing here, and this kind of is the overarching kind of theme in this first paragraph and this first bit of the question, is they mentioned also about abhorring the idea of practicing incorrectly over and over again. And that's essentially what is happening in the case that I just mentioned. If you're enjoying this video and want step-by-step guidance from me to improve your technique, check out my Online Archery Academy video courses. Go to onlinearcheryacademy.com, click Explore the Courses for a special discount. Now back to the video. It's really important when you're practicing, there must be something you are doing. So in the example of the person that wasn't improving, I've seen this over and over again. This isn't just an isolated incident of one person. And for me as well, I've had periods where I was training a lot and I didn't improve as well. So I'm not saying I'm immune to this or anything. This can happen to everyone. And the number one reason for this is you're not actually changing anything. You think you're training, but just training doesn't do anything. Just training and turning up and shooting 600 arrows or whatever it is, whether you're shooting 50 arrows a day, 3 days a week, and you just turn up and shoot, or you then do 800 a day, you're not actually doing anything if you're just training. You need to actually have a plan of what you're going to do and be like, okay, well, looking at my technique, looking at my scoring, now this is what I need to work on. How am I going to work on that? How am I going to get feedback as to if I'm doing that correctly or not? And then how am I going to improve that? And then how am I going to measure that at the end and see if I've actually improved? So this kind of goes along to the other part here, where they're saying if I'm shooting 100 days a week, so they're shooting 280 average at 70 meters, what are the most likely biggest bangs for my buck? I can't fully say because I'm not seeing them shoot, but let's continue the example they gave and kind of make up a scenario. Let's assume someone came to me shooting 280 average at 70 meters, and I've seen their technique and generally it looks good, but in this example, he mentioned about the hooking and the fingers not coming off the string how they would like. Then we'd have to go, okay, let's think about how are we going to improve the release. It sounds like, from this example, that they feel like the release is the biggest roadblock to them improving. So I'm assuming from this that their kind of structure at full draw is good, anchor on the face is fairly consistent, all of that kind of stuff. Maybe strength is okay as well, but release is the number one thing. So you have to then make up a plan of, I'm going to work on the release. And if you then go training and you shoot your number of arrows and you're going to go to the range and say, oh, I'm just going to work on my release today. But in doing that, you do the same thing, i.e. not anything uncomfortable, then you won't improve. I did this for years when I was working on my timing. I was trying to shoot quicker. I was coming into full draw and I'd hold too long and aim too much, and I was trying to shoot quicker. And I would work on my timing. I would go to the range and work on it. That's my main goal today. But in truth, now looking back, and when I then actually finally successfully worked on my timing, I wasn't pushing myself out of my comfort zone. I was trying to work on my timing, but also trying to keep the feeling of the shot that I assumed was correct. So there was no actual change because I wasn't willing to do the thing that was going to change the feeling of the shot. In the release example, for example, if you feel like your release is, how they said on the question, my fingers are not coming off the string how I would like, do I remedy this first at all costs or keep shooting and increase volume while continuing to work on hooking along the way? This is a great example. You won't be able to work on this on its own at all costs first and then shoot lots of volume. You will need to work on this in a really focused way, making many, many mistakes, trying to improve it with lots of volume, and that's how you get to the actual improved result. So I just want to highlight that difference again. So you can't, if your release is not great, you can't say, I'm going to try and work on my release. I'm not going to do a lot of arrow volume. I'm not going to shoot a lot. I'm going to work on my release, get that perfect. And then once that's perfect, then I'm going to train a lot and really nail that. Never works. Absolutely never works. Because it's the issue here is the kind of, we need a mindset shift of failing is good and doing mistakes in training is good. Whereas the kind of question here, this is why I wanted to talk about this because it's really interesting, but the type of question here is a little bit like they're trying to get the perfect shot, and then finally when that perfect shot has been achieved, then and only then can they train fully and embed that. But that's not how it works. You have to be willing to make mistakes, and that's why I was talking about being uncomfortable earlier. In my timing example, at the time when I wasn't actually properly working on it, I was uncomfortable forcing myself to shoot faster because I was worried about the outcome and it was difficult and uncomfortable. i.e., my worry was, I'm going to come up, pull through the clicker quick and shoot quickly, and I'm worried that the arrow is not going to go in the middle. My grouping is not going to be as good as it was before. Completely valid concern, and probably that is what would happen at first, and sometimes the groups would be wider. It would feel uncomfortable because I'm not ready to shoot. The sight isn't on the middle. I'm not quite there yet. But all of those things are valid, and that's what makes them a little bit dangerous as excuses because they're completely valid. But the truth is, you're not going to change your technique unless you completely push yourself out of the comfort zone. So going back to this example with the hooking, at the moment, this archer has a certain feeling of what they think the release is good, what they think is a good release. And they might even have images, maybe people watching can identify with this, they might even have an image in their head of, oh, that time I did this competition and my release was amazing and it felt like this and the shots felt super smooth and soft and it just felt great. And they have retrospectively put a rose tinting on their release and said, I shot a PB that day, or maybe I shot a good end, or maybe I had a good evening shooting and the weather was nice. And retrospectively on that, they've said to themselves, that must be what a good release should feel like. But actually, their feeling might be wrong, and it probably is. So in this example, this is why you need objective feedback, really important, ideally someone else. Maybe a very competent archer that you shoot with, or a club mate who really knows their stuff and is a very high level, ideally a coach to get feedback from. Or if you don't have that option, taking objective video feedback, i.e. a video of you shooting, and saying, how are we going to measure this? For the example of the fingers on the string, most phone cameras now, you can record some high speed, maybe 120 frames a second, 240 frames a second, whatever it is. You can record some high speed, and you can see your fingers, how much they open, how much they close, how far out from the neck they go, how forward you collapse. If the elbow from the back, when you're putting the camera at the back there, you can see if the elbow collapses, that's obviously going to give a bad release in the fingers. So if you don't have a coach, you don't have someone to watch and objectively give you that feedback, you need to find a way of getting that feedback for yourself. So you can't bullshit yourself basically and say, yeah, I'm doing it okay. This kind of feels better, but not really sure, because you'll find a way to do that. So this is really, really important, and why I kind of wanted to answer this. And the way you do that in the release example is, say for example, you have that certain feeling that you think, okay, this is good. This is my normal feeling, and yeah, sometimes it feels okay, and yeah, that's all right. You need to do something that feels quite different, uncomfortable, different, wrong, even. But forget your feelings of what you think is wrong and think is uncomfortable, and just do it and see what the results are. See how your release looks. For example, if I was giving advice to this person here, I would say, do some grip and rip drills. Start with blank bail and see how it feels, really keeping your fingertips more curled, even though maybe you think that might be wrong. Keep your fingertips more curled and feel like you're ripping through more and really keeping that close to the neck. Do that at blank bail, then try it at long distance. See how that changes your shot, and see how your draw elbow movement changes, see how your release changes. Watch it on the video and see what changes. And if the change isn't what you want, i.e. you've done a completely different feeling, you've really gone for it, and the change isn't what you want, try a different feeling. Try it more. In the pulling away from the target and being aggressive, if you still feel like your release isn't good, try pulling harder. We talked about anchor and string pressure on the face, me and Mike Peart, in a previous video recently. But maybe if your release isn't great and you want to work on it, overdo it a bit. Feel like you're coming in, really, really pull and shoot quick, and see if that improves your release. So that's the kind of main thing I wanted to share from the first part. And they said about their release still being desirable. If you are training and you're trying to work on something and it's not improving, you have to ask yourself, can I change something in what I'm doing to help it improve? I.e. in this case, ask yourself, am I working with a coach at the moment? Am I getting feedback objectively, like I mentioned with a video camera? Have I got someone else that can keep me accountable and check my progress? Have I got a score goal that I'm trying to reach that can maybe keep me accountable? So those are just a few things like I've mentioned. Let's get into the other example. Archer is not ready for 70 meters yet and is shooting 220 indoor face. Okay, so I'm assuming out of 300, maybe like a 18 meter kind of thing. Progressing and shooting 4 to 5 days a week, 100 arrows. What do you recommend then? Shoot 50 meters to get used to distance if 70 is too far. I don't like seeing people go for 70 meters too soon. Always too stressful and unproductive. Generically, I'm scoring 200. What do? I'm shooting 250. What's the advice? 300. What's the advice? 330. What's the advice? So it's quite hard to give these kind of general recommendations for score levels without seeing someone shoot. But let me try and break it down a little bit. So they've mentioned about the indoor face here. I'm assuming on these ones they're mentioning about outdoors, because 330 out of 300 for the indoors would be pretty good. No problems there. So let's go back to 70 meters. If you're scoring 200, what do you need to do? You need to work on the basic foundation of your alignment and full draw position. pretty much. If you're only shooting 200, chances are your draw length is not going to be consistent. Your expansion through the clicker is not going to be consistent. There's a lot to work on in your set position and all of that kind of stuff. But the kind of main things you're going to get is by nailing your posture, making sure your grip and your hook is correct, and getting to a consistent full draw position. Strength is almost certainly going to be an issue as well. So for this person, bow training, full draw holds with bow training to make sure they're in the right position, maybe with a light bow first. Posture, stance, and alignment. Set position as well is not a bad thing, because I mentioned about the grip and the hook is going to give the consistency of that full draw. So that's pretty much what's going to be at the bottom end there. But you need to see them shoot really. If I'm shooting 250, what's the advice? It's me again here. If you don't want to join the courses just yet, but you want help from me, sign up to my free weekly newsletter by putting your email address in at onlinearcheryacademy.com and clicking join now. Or click become a member to join my online membership community, where you can get access to loads of exclusive content, plus ask questions directly for me to answer in Q&A sessions. So check that out if you want to. And now back to the video. Okay, so 250, chances are you've probably got an idea of your full draw position. You've got an idea of, okay, I need to come up here. I've maybe even set my grip and my hook correctly. What's the advice here? Expansion would be my advice here. A lot of people, 250, assuming this is, on a 720, so 250, that would be 500 out of 720 for the full 70 meter round. At this level, I see a lot of people struggling with expansion and alignment. Those are probably the two main ones that I see, because a lot of people at this level, sometimes they pull through the clicker nicely and they get a consistent, good direction on both sides, and sometimes they jolt through and everything kind of moves. So expansion and the finishing position there, the release and follow through, that would be the main thing. And if you work on that and you're trying to work on that with a coach and you're not able to progress, the chances are you're not able to work on it because your alignment is off and you're trying to expand, but your alignment is off and you end up kind of jolting and it's a bit odd. So 250. 300. So now this is where we're really getting into it now. 300 out of 360. So you're shooting 600 on a 720. And this is getting to the point where your expansion is getting a lot better. But what I see really often at this level of shooting is someone will have a basic understanding of the shot sequence, the set position. They might have even played around with having the bow on the foot versus the leg and that kind of thing. Their full draw is maybe good, but the finer details and the consistency of their sequence is not really there. Strength is always a play in all of these. That's just a given, i.e. bow training. But I really see consistently with the 300 kind of level, what I was mentioning there. So what I mean by that consistency of the shot sequence is people will be aware that the set position is important and they'll say they're doing it, but when I really watch them shoot, their hand is in a different position every time on their bow. So they think it's consistent, and in their defense, the only reason they can't feel it's different is that they need more arrows. They need more arrows to kind of feel it and sense that it's in the wrong place. But essentially, you need to focus on some of the finer details and make sure your sequence is the same each time. So it's kind of building up an idea of setting the hand in the right place. So grip and hook is very important here as well, again, like I mentioned, but making sure that's the same. And on this level of shooting, I see a lot of people that generally it's good, but they may even shoot some days 620, 630, something like that. But their set position will vary shot to shot and day to day, and their posture will vary shot to shot and day to day. The posture is especially important because their spine position and their head position will just slightly vary, and some days, if they're feeling strong and their posture's good, they'll feel like everything is really good and they've got their sequence a little bit more firm because you've got that central column and that posture is really good. But then the next day they come back and maybe they're leaning back from the target a little bit, or they're raising the bow and kind of jolting back. They've changed their foundation, and this is where the inconsistency comes. And it's that inconsistency in the posture, i.e. the head moving, the spine moving, and that kind of thing, and the inconsistency in the grip and the hook, that is what limits them to improve to 310, 320. Because if that changes, maybe for example, your posture has changed and your set and your hook has changed, you can't then get a consistent feeling expansion to work on that part of the shot and really nail your release down. So this is why it's really important at this range of shooting to make sure that's correct. So that's for like 600, and now we get onto the next bit. So the final bit, 330. I might do an interview or like a podcast style with Mike as well and kind of get his thoughts on this. But for 330, so you're shooting 660 at 70 meters, high level. What's the kind of main thing you're going to work on here? So one of the main things, this is when it really gets very important. You need a lot of arrow volume. You need many, many, many repetitions to go from 640 to 660 at 70 meters, and to go from 660 to maybe 680 or 690, even more. So this is going to be really where you've got scoring drills, timing drills, rhythm and timing is going to play a huge part of this. Expansion drills, similar to what I mentioned before with the 200 level, that massively different full draw position for the 200 level, that has now, if you're shooting 330 at 70 meters, the chances are you're coming to a great place on your clicker, but maybe sometimes you're expanding smoothly and sometimes you're finding it difficult to get through the clicker, and that changes your rhythm of your shooting. So maybe your rhythm, your timing of your shot to shot might not be the same. So that's going to be a key one. And then finally, your continuous movement. So this kind of level, the 330 and onwards, and I would kind of say even if you're shooting 640 at 70 meters, getting from 640 up to 660 or to 680, a lot of it, assuming you've got good alignment, good full draw position, good set in your hook and that kind of thing, a lot of this next level is going to be rhythm and timing and a fluid movement, kind of putting everything together, less step by step, but kind of coalescing all of that into one smooth and fluid shot. So that's what's going to be really important. And in order to do that, your training needs to reflect that. You can't just go to the range and shoot around or shoot 100 arrows at a distance and then kind of call it a day. You will need specific drills, i.e. 90-second drill, shooting 6 arrows in 90 seconds for rhythm and timing. Maybe different timing drills where you're shooting in the wind and it's difficult, or maybe 20 seconds per arrow. There's lots of different drills you can do, but essentially you need something to prioritize the rhythm and the timing above all else so that you can train that and begin to learn that aiming is a little bit less important than you thought, or getting the absolute perfect kind of position is less important than you thought. Might sound weird, but actually it's the movement that does the main lifting and gets you the consistent grouping. So stuff like that is going to be really important. And I can't avoid talking about the mindset and the mental kind of side of things here. Visualization, kind of planning and visualizing your shot sequence, really important here as well. So that's kind of a brief kind of rundown of what they were mentioning there about the different kind of levels of scoring. But as a general thing from this question, I just encourage everyone that's watching to ask themselves, am I actually working on something and changing it in practice? Am I pushing myself to be uncomfortable and try something new? Because if you're not, and it feels comfortable, then you're not changing anything. And do I have objective feedback, whether that's a coach, someone who's a really good archer, or objective video feedback that I can't fool myself with? So this is kind of my thoughts on this. I wanted to give you kind of a rundown with that. And hopefully you found the video useful and interesting. Let me know your thoughts or kind of where you are in your journey of this kind of score level in the comments below. And I'd be interested to see what got you the biggest jump. So say, for example, you used to shoot 250 out of 360 at 70 meters, and then you were working on stuff, it didn't work, you had a plateau, but then you worked on one specific area and you really found that made a difference. I'd love to hear in the comments below what that was and why you think that gave you the kind of sudden improvement, if you like. So hopefully that was useful, and I'll see you in the next video.